Kaulig Racing. Matt Kaulig, you're the man. Let's party.
Rise and shine, everybody. Let's put a smile on that face. It is race weekend here. Well, not here, but down there in oh my God, help me out, man. I'm Canadian.
I mean, as I know they're in Talladega. I know they're in Alabama, but I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know where in Alabama they actually are, and I now feel like a terrible racing fan.
I thought maybe you might have the exact location, but no, I have no idea. Are we confident that the race is going to get in this weekend? By the way, let me just start off by saying right now that anybody down there in Florida or anywhere else being affected right now by what's going on, we're definitely thinking of you and hope that you and your loved ones and everybody with you is able to get to safety. That's definitely the most important thing at the moment. Do we know if they're going to have any effects from what's going on down there, if they're even going to be able to race?
Yeah, you know what? I think they are going to be able to race. The storm path is definitely going up more along the eastern seaboard. South Carolina, North Carolina, Charlotte's going to get pounded this week, but Alabama and the southern states, I think, will probably be all right. It definitely looks like it will rain Friday, but I think both the Xfinity and Cup should be pretty safe to get their stuff in over the weekend.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. So there's a lot going on right now. The fact is, you guys are probably seeing this episode before the previous episode just because of a whirlwind of reasons that is completely on my end, not on Ryan's end. So apologies there. Although you're going to start to notice a little bit of changes in terms of the way things are done just to make episodes easier to go out. And hopefully that runs fairly smoothly. Always feel free to comment in the comment section down below if you have any thoughts on just what's going on in NASCAR or with Kaulig Racing or what you'd like to see us do with the show. Feel free to share them. We're not closed-minded enough to not to listen to what people have to say. Anyways, man, we have a lot to talk about. We have whatever the hell is going on with the Next Gen Cup car and people that are falling victim to the safety issues it has. Then we also have this weird Justin Haley thing that came out that I don't really understand. And then we have some Justin Haley facts to back it up. And we have Xfinity this weekend. We have Cup this weekend. And then I hear there's something happening next week, man. Lots going on.
Oh, my goodness. It is a jam-packed week to say the least. And you know, the world of NASCAR is dealing with some bigger issue topics for sure than just the Kaulig race report. But you know, it's an exciting race weekend ahead. Talladega, you know, is always a crap shoot, but our cars run really well there. So, you know, I know Justin Haley is going to have a good shot to run well. I think both the Xfinity cars are going to run pretty well. They always seem to. At they're not. Well, I guess they are plate cars still in the Xfinity series, but yeah, it's quite a lot to get to this week. Oh, you love your mute button.
And I want to start with Justin Haley, though. Bloody hell, damn mute. This poll came out, and I'm not going to put the poll up because honestly, I don't really know what the reporter was thinking doing that. And she's a pretty well-known reporter, and I know she's not. I don't think she's the one that went and conducted the survey, but like it just brings up drama and BS, and then some people probably were quite caught off guard by their names being on this list. And apparently Justin Haley is like the 5th or 6th most hated driver in NASCAR, according to social media analytics, which seems like the most batshit crazy thing I've ever heard in my life, because Justin Haley not only seems like a stand-up dude and an honest individual, but everyone I've ever heard talk about him, whether it's people in the Cup Garage or people online, seem to think he's a good dude.
Yeah, it's quite strange to me. Again, I scour social media way more than probably most individuals. And, one thing about Justin Haley is he's a fairly soft spoken man. He doesn't, draw a lot of natural media attention in the first place. And when he does, it's usually for, some very, small talk, just in the news talking about his sponsors, bringing up the weekend's race. So to see him on the dislike list, it was, I can't quite wrap my head around it. It makes not a lot of sense to me because, to me, he's one of the nicest guys in the garage when he can, when they actually do talk to him. And, social media in general is always a popularity contest. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm surprised he was even in the poll. No disrespect to Justin Haley, but, when you talk about social media clicks or mentions or stuff like that, Justin Haley's just not a name I normally see floating around. So to me, it was very odd. There's a couple names on there that made a little bit more sense, but at the same token, I think that poll was extremely flawed when you have people like Daniel Kvyat and Jacques Villeneuve, who did one. I was a Kimi Räikkönen. But anyway, the guys that have done one race and they're somehow in the NASCAR's most disliked poll. I don't know. I'm not buying it.
I mean, I love Jacques Villeneuve. He's the most successful Canadian race car driver of all time. But he's probably done some things in the past that would sour some fans that aren't related to this season, but they just hold on to it and hate on him anyway. So I kind of get that. But maybe we can look at the numbers a little bit, and between the people that laugh about the Kaulig cars being contenders, and joke about Justin Haley, I bet you they don't expect to see this graphic come out. What are your thoughts on this, man?
I didn't expect this graphic to come out, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, as somebody that follows Kaulig Racing very, very, detailed, we watch where they run week in and week out. Yeah, I could 100% see the improvement in performance. The Kaulig Cup cars have been very solid all year long, to be honest. But the last handful, 2 months, 3 months, it was a marked improvement. I think early in the year we were kind of happy with top 20s, right around 20th, and now the last couple months they've been running top 15s. And to see Justin Haley, with an average finish of 13.25, amongst a list of all playoff drivers, Michael McDowell is in there as well, but that is a very impressive list of drivers to be with. And it really goes to show the steady improvements of the organization. Justin Haley is really beginning to, I think, get his feet wet in the Cup car. And I know Justin's actually has a lot more Cup experience than we kind of think about, because he has raced for some of the bottom tier teams for a few seasons. But having his first opportunity in a competitive ride, you can see that the maturation, the maturity is really taking foot. And the fact that he's averaging a top 15 was surprising to me, but very encouraged for sure by what we're seeing out of Justin Haley and the Kaulig cars in general.
Yeah, I think just the Kaulig cars in both series have picked it up, but specifically the Cup series. Like, they have been significantly better. And you have Justin Haley in the last 4 races being the 8th most successful driver on the circuit. And to be honest, it showed in the car's performance and his performance. And again, I think some people just scoff at the idea of Kaulig ever being anything more than a mid-pack team. Some people call them bottom feeders, and those people just have no idea what they're talking about. Apologies for the background noise there. But yeah, no, I don't think that they're bottom feeders at all, and I think the organization's improving. Justin Haley's young; he's only going to get better as long as the equipment continues to improve, or at least stays near where it is. Only good things to come for him. But that also brings up this stat here, man. And that is for the second time this season, Kaulig Racing has made it back-to-back weekends with a top 10 finish. Both times it was AJ Allmendinger followed by Justin Haley. So it's that time of the week again, or week, I suppose, ladies and gentlemen, where we have to ask, what's going to happen on Kaulig Fan Day? Now,
Let the speculation run.
I sent you this kind of tongue-in-cheek earlier this week and said, is this like in any way a little tease for next week? And I'm not necessarily convinced it is, and I certainly wouldn't bet on this being intentionally designed for that. I think that's probably overestimating things. But, I mean, facts are facts, and facts seem to say that that's their best chance at success in that series.
I know you're saying it tongue in cheek, but the reality is it shows where the team excels. It excels when AJ is in the car, and it's really starting to excel with Justin week in and week out. And it's not surprising that, when one driver, busts into the top 10, that the momentum carries over into the next week, and the other driver busts into the top 10. And I think by proxy of these results, leading into the announcement next week and then into 2023 as a whole, I think we're going to start seeing this stat more often. And I'm waiting for the weekend when both cars get in the top 10, because they've been knocking on the door. It's right around the corner. So, I think the premonition is just in the pudding. These guys are performing within the cars, and they're really taking them to the next level. And, kind of going back to your previous thought about Kaulig Racing and kind of the status of the organization, if you ask the people in the know, the other, teams, the media that travels with NASCAR week in and week out, they're going to be the first to tell you that Kaulig brings a lot to the table, and, they're in it to perform. And, I don't think they are looked at least within the NASCAR world, as a small team. I think there's an expectation that Kaulig is there to take the leap, and I said it before, when you compare to another organization, 23XI, where they were in their first full season, and to where they are now in their second season, winning races. I see a similar trajectory with Kaulig, and maybe to the general fan that doesn't know, Justin Haley from, couldn't pick him out of a lineup, to, obviously AJ's not full time. That the expectation isn't there that Kaulig's going to be able to perform. But I think the team has proven now over the last couple of seasons that they're here, and they're going to be ready to take the next leap, and maybe not win a ton of races, but be up in the top 15, top 10, and 100% competing for a playoff berth next year.
Yeah, maybe even 2. You never know. So, and I also wouldn't close the door on Kaulig winning a race this year. So, is it likely? Probably not. Probably not even at the Roval. But AJ's probably not the favorite. You probably have to go with a guy like Chase Elliott. But make no mistake, if he's in contention late, look out. If he's in contention in front of him, I'm not going to like what happens. Well, I'll be fine with what happens to the one. I'm imagining a lot of other people will not be.
Yes, but I don't even think we should overlook this weekend. I mean, we're going to a super speedway, and Justin Haley has proven that he is one of the best plate racers in the series. So, obviously a lot of luck goes into winning a plate race, but Justin Haley could easily win one this weekend as well. So I think the next couple of weekends really give Kaulig the best chance. If they are going to get into the winners column this year, it's probably going to happen in the next 2 weeks. I don't disagree with you going into the Roval. Chase Elliott, even Tyler Reddick, who's won 2 races already on a road course this year. They're going to be the ones to look out for. But it's not out of the realm. And I do think the Roval is AJ's best track, and he could win it. So I'm super excited. I am very energized to see where we go over the next 2 weekends. And of course, as you mentioned, that driver's announcements now less than a week away. And I think we're in for a treat. I fully expect that the 6 car is going to be piloted by AJ Allmendinger full time. And that in and of itself, I hope opens up some momentum going into the Roval as well.
I'm so nervous, dude, because any other thing than like literally not just driver, but thing like Kaulig has leased the charter for a year. Kaulig has sold the charter period. Kaulig splits the time between Allmendinger, Hemrick, and Castle or something, or another driver. Anything that is not AJ Allmendinger as the full-time driver of that car is the wrong decision for the team, given what's currently available.
Yeah, I think we've kind of beat that dead horse to death here, but I agree with you. It's if they go in any other direction.
Like, are
Yeah.
you confident that on specifically the 5th they're going to announce him? Like, they could not announce him, announce everything else, and then make the announcement about him driving at the end of the season or something. I think that would be a mistake in this flyer that they put out.
Yeah, it's they've really built this thing up. They're promoting the 5K charity run prior to the driver announcement. But I'm a glass half full kind of guy. I'm team positivity all the way, and I am about as confident as I can be that they're going to announce it at this Fan Appreciation Day. They very clearly have 2023 Cup driver announcements. They are going to make a driver announcement. It makes no sense that they're going to repeat that Justin Haley's coming back. I think everybody knows that. So it has to be the driver of the 16 car, and I am confident.
PR on that one. The driver announcement is Justin Haley is returning for the 31. With all due respect to Justin, eek, that would not look good.
Listen, Kaulig brings a great social media department to the table, maybe the best in the business. They know how to produce hype, and they're gonna make this announcement count. There's no ifs, ands, or buts in my mind. That's what's to come on Wednesday, October 5th is going to be something spectacular.
We will figure out what that is in less than a week's time. I would hope. I can't confirm this, man. I don't know if you've heard, but I would hope that specifically for their driver announcements, that there's some sort of live stream, not just video, live stream. Because if it's not live stream, somebody with a Twitter account who's there is going to release the news themselves, and it's going to kind of spoil the moment for those of us that can't be there.
Well, I tend to believe that there's going to be some level of promo video the morning of to roll in the announcements, and I'm assuming that promo probably comes before the 10 a.m. clock time. So this is just my speculation that we'll know who the driver is before 10 a.m.
Really? Interesting.
I do. That's how Kaulig rolls. They love their promotional videos, and either at 10 or slightly before 10, they're gonna share the video out on social media. Now, I hope they have a live stream as well, but even if they don't, they're going to be the ones that spill the beans on the driver announcement, not some live Facebook live video situation.
I would hope so, because I think we've had enough of leaks and stuff, not just like Kaulig related, but like some of the fan experience has been ruined by some of the leaks. Well, not like, hey, for guys like you and I who are on social media, man, it was fun to do the Kyle Busch thing. At least for me, it was, and figure out where he was going and what was going to happen. But when it comes time to actually make the official 100%, it's guaranteed, I always feel like that should come from the team or the driver and not some reporter. I know that's not how it works, but it does take a little bit away from that fan experience, and I hope that's what they're going for with this.
Yeah, and I'm already bracing myself that the information is going to leak early. I don't think there's been a single sports announced in the last 3 years that's been actually announced by the organization at the time they said they were going to do it. It's unfortunate, but it's the world we live in. So, it definitely takes some of the luster away. But I also have, in this particular case, um, this isn't like AJ. Again, I'm going to assume AJ is the announcement. He's been with Kaulig now for 3-4 years. This isn't quite the big shebang that Kyle Busch to RCR was ever going to be. If it leaks early, it leaks early. I don't think anybody's really going to lose too much sleep over it, but I am expecting a pretty cool video when the time's right.
I think that there's a chance that this one might not leak, simply because it's not like it's, say, AJ Allmendinger's leaving Penske Racing to go to Kaulig Racing to be their flagship driver, where there's a chance for that stuff to get out. All the parties are already in-house. So you would think that if they have something done and they're trying to preserve the fan experience, there should be no reason to leak it. You should be able to control that source of information when it's a driver that's already in your house.
I agree, and I agree, and I think that goes to the interview that Bob Pockrass, did with AJ last week during the Xfinity roundtable. They're going into the playoffs. They tried to poke some information out of him, and he gave the answer that he gave, and I stand by my statement that AJ probably bluffed a little bit on his statement that he said he hadn't had any talks about the Cup car, and I just flat don't believe him. So, I definitely think they're trying to play coy. I definitely think they're trying to make this announcement as, spectacular as they can. But we'll see. We'll see.
So yeah, October the 5th, and my hope would be as long as Ryan has some availability that night on October the 5th, is we would get an episode out that night. It is a Wednesday. Typically, him and I don't do Wednesdays, but I'd like to get something out for it as quickly as possible. That leads us to a slightly more. We'll touch on the this weekend preview a little bit at the very end for Kaulig, but slightly more significant issues going on. And why don't you tell everybody, if they haven't heard yet? I'm assuming they have, but the unfortunate Alex Bowman news.
Yeah, I mean, breaking news tonight for sure coming out of the NASCAR world. Alex Bowman will be out of the 48 Ally car this weekend at Talladega. His wreck at Texas, unfortunately, has produced concussion symptoms very similar to Kurt Busch earlier in the year. And he has been pulled from the car, which is really disappointing if you're an Alex Bowman fan for a lot of reasons. He is a playoff driver, which I think really impacts this even more than if it was anybody else. But Alex Bowman will be out at least the Talladega weekend. But with the concussions, those don't heal very quickly. So I wouldn't be surprised if Alex Bowman misses a couple races or maybe even the rest of the season. As a racing driver, you're focused. You have to be able to be 100% focused for 3.5 hours, at a time. And if your brain is foggy, that's definitely not a good situation. I am actually amazed he finished that race at Texas, because he did, his in-car audio, he came over the radio after the accident and says, I don't think I can continue the rest of the race. And I'm sure he was thinking the car was totaled, and it surprisingly wasn't. They were able to get the car fixed, and he kind of limped it around the rest of the afternoon. But always a scary situation when you're talking about concussions. And Noah Gregson's going to have an opportunity to step in that car. That's a good situation for Noah, but a really bad situation for Alex and NASCAR. And that's reignited the debate that I think we've all been having over the last couple of weeks. Where is the safety in these cars? They've been saying truthfully all year that they've been taking the hardest hits they've ever taken in their entire racing careers this year. um, and it's not sustainable. And I think they tried to kind of play it off and not say too much and let NASCAR maybe make some changes quietly. But after the Kurt injury, it really magnified. And then even though he ended up being okay. Um, the Cody Ware accident on Sunday was one of the scariest wrecks we've seen any Cup driver take in a long, long, long time. And he had to be pulled from his car. He was put on a stretcher, taken to the infield care center. And, I was following Twitter pretty closely during the race. And, it was quite obvious even at that point that there was a real problem here. And NASCAR must address the safety issues. And we're six races now to the end of the year. I don't see them making any drastic changes this year, which is really unfortunate. I don't want to see another driver get hurt. But I did watch a clip from Andy Petrie earlier today, and he did, say, he's been, in contact with NASCAR. They've already started to identify some changes to the car they plan to make in the off season to try to make these cars a little bit safer, make sure these impacts aren't nearly as bad as they have been. And I truly hope it means more crumple zones. The cars aren't crumpling, they're too stiff. And because of the stiffness, especially in the rear end, and if you look at the image here on the screen, Kurt Busch and Alex Bowman's accident are almost identical in the way they impacted the wall. Rear end first, and that is going straight to the driver. And now we've got two drivers out. And I do want to just quickly, I really applaud Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin. They have been extremely vocal the last 6 weeks, couple months in regards to the driver's safety. I think they've really taken the reins, publicly at least, to voice their displeasure, probably speaking for the rest of the drivers. And I just want to read a couple tweets that they kind of sent within a few minutes of each other. This is Kevin Harvick saying, "This is completely unacceptable that these changes, that those in charge have let things get to this point. I remember it was yesterday that Denny Hamlin, in a presentation of the new car, that the drivers were pleading to NASCAR that the cars were too stiff. The NASCAR data didn't agree, but now it's time to listen. The drivers are crashing these cars." So very vocal tweet from Kevin. And then Denny shortly thereafter came out and said this: "It's pretty disappointing that our sanctioning body refuses to acknowledge or accept any responsibility for drivers getting hurt. It's the same. They said, we knew better. It's wrong. These drivers continue to get taken advantage of by the system." So very, very strong words from both Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin, basically pointing the finger straight at NASCAR, saying that the car is not safe. They've been saying this truthfully since the preseason and last season during the testing, and they've been completely ignored. And now we've got two drivers that are going to be missing time due to injury. And this is a topic that's not going to go away. This is not something that the driver is going to just let go of. So I am curious to see what the NASCAR response is going to be to this, because it needs to be swift, it needs to be drastic, and it needs to work quickly. So very big news coming out of NASCAR in regards to driver safety tonight.
Yeah, I look, we'll touch on like the performance, the supposed performance issues in a few, but safety, there's no discussion there. You got to do it, plain and simple. And I have a feeling the changes might not be nearly as drastic as people think they need to be, other than you need to protect the guy in the cockpit better. That doesn't mean drastically altering the whole car. There's got to be ways around that. The scary thing for me is I've watched that wreck a few times on Twitter now, from the in-car and from not in the in-car. And I'm not speaking for him, and I'm not pretending I know, but the hit is not as bad as Kurt Busch's. the impact, or not the impact, but the way it looks doesn't look anywhere close to as bad, in my opinion. And he still got hurt.
Yeah.
And still called it the hardest impact that he's felt, which I don't know, but there's got to be some Talladega and Daytona ones that are worse. Sorry. That's the stuff. Like, I do think there's some exaggerating going on at times, not by the guys that are hurt, by some of the other guys. But at the end of the day, it's safety. It's 2022. I know I've seen that. Well, it's still safer than F1 and IndyCar, and yeah, well, they're open, not quite open cockpit anymore, but like they're open wheel cars. You're always going to be in much more danger driving those than a stock car. At the end of the day, you have to fix the safety issues, and you probably should have done it by now.
Yeah, and
at least.
Yeah, I tell you, and the one thing about I believe Alex in the moment that probably was one of the hardest hits he's ever taken. But to your point, there was an accident. I don't remember when. This was several years ago. He was driving a midget car, and he ended up spending 7 days in the ICU because of an accident in his midget car. So he's obviously had some severe injuries outside of a cup car. So. But still, the impact that they're taking is beyond what they've experienced in the past. And that's the really weird thing about sports injuries in general. I mean, I'm going to reference a football injury that happened this weekend. Sterling Shepard tore his ACL, and all he did was run in a straight line, and his ACL tore. So it's not necessarily how bad it looks on television. There's a lot of circumstances that go into when an athlete gets injured and when they don't. And you're right, his hit didn't look too bad. I mean, but he did hit in the worst part of these cars, which is the back bumper. There is no give in those back bumpers. The energy is transferred from that bumper through the chassis straight into the seat. And I am a huge follower of IndyCar and F1. And I can tell you this, what those cars do better than any NASCAR has ever done is dissipate energy by disparting. The car comes apart. When they hit the wall, parts and pieces scatter. And that dissipates a lot of energy that allows the energy to go outward away from the cockpit of the car and allows the driver to absorb a much smaller impact. And, if NASCAR wants to continue using spec parts, and I am 100% on board with spec parts, I think that's the way to go. If you look at the competition this year, it certainly shows those parts need to be able to come apart. They need to step from the car, and it might mean the cars, if you hit the wall, you back it into the wall, your day's done. But you know what? Up until this year, that's always been the case. So the car needs to either have better crumple zones that allow it to squish, or the parts themselves need to come off to dissipate energy. And I agree. I don't think the changes going into next year will be significant, but they are definitely going to improve in one of those two areas.
I think you just got to improve on safety. Like, that's number one, no matter how you get it done. Look, it's auto racing. You're always going to be risking your life doing it. That's just a fact. God bless them, but look at the Adam Petty and Kenny Irwin crashes. I think when people see those happen, you probably didn't think what happened had happened, and it had. Just terrible. We don't need to see that happen to anyone else. It's one thing, when these guys can't get behind the wheel. It's another thing when they get taken away from their family and their friends and daughters and sons. That becomes, we don't want to see that. I don't want to see that anyways. No racing's worth that.
No. And I think this is why the drivers have been so vocal this year. NASCAR has been at the forefront of safety. We haven't lost a driver since Dale Sr. back in 2001. So, the track record's there that NASCAR cares about safety. They've been innovative and they've done a lot of good things. But there's really been a backwards trajectory with the new car. And I was at the Daytona 500 a few years ago, 2020, when Newman had his accident. I watched it. It happened right in front of me. And there was just an eerie feeling then that we had lost Ryan Newman, that was an accident that nobody was going to be able to survive. And thankfully, Ryan Newman, though concussed, was relatively okay. Um, but you know it in auto racing, those moments when silence comes across the track that things aren't right. And we don't want to experience those moments ever. Um, and I really think NASCAR is going to take the necessary steps to make these cars better. I have all in the world in NASCAR. I really do. That they will get this figured out. Because you're right, as somebody that's I've been there. I've been at a track when a driver died, and it's not something I want to relive, and it's not a topic that any racing fan, any racing driver ever wants to have to go through. And it's the inherent part of the sport. It's what makes auto racing as exhilarating as it is. Um, but at the same token, we have to do our best to make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, safety first, and let's not lose anybody else. It's the last thing we need. So, however they get it done, address the safety concerns.
Yep.
Now, with that said, the most important part out of the way, spec parts have to stay. You need the parity that has been created here. We talked about it on the episode that has not been released yet. Is your charter system that you've been introduced that you're gun ho about is worth way more money when the competition is way closer. It just is. That's basic facts. You know, how many different winners now? 18, 19?
19 different winners. Yep.
That's kind of a lot, but you telling me you wouldn't be okay with, 12 to 14 different winners every single year and sometimes more? I would be. It makes the sport way more exciting. And there's a an odds makers play in this too, where that they're significantly involved in all major sports, and it's better for them if it's harder for you to guess who's going to finish where. So there's that going into it too. But there's a lot of stuff going on, and I know you're pro Danny Hamlin and you want to see him win a championship, but there was a moment this weekend that really pissed me off as a fan. And it shows some of that driver bias. As an owner, I'm sure he's super concerned about Kurt, probably concerned about Alex too. But the driver bias, literally in like a few hour span, he went from saying, because he had gotten taken out there by Alex's teammate, actually.
That's right.
Weird. That he was constantly having to go to the back and passing cars all night, and he was able to get through the field. And then a few hours later, it's, oh, no, you can't pass. What is it? It can't be both. You said one thing at one point, and a few hours later, you're saying a completely other thing. I thought there was lots of fall off this weekend at Texas, like way more than at Bristol. Wasn't even close. But that's the part that worries me, because you're going to have Hendrick Motorsports, Joe Gibbs Racing, I'm blanking on Penske, maybe Stuart Haas to an extent. All those guys are going to be, of course, they want a much bigger advantage than the other guys. They're spending the most money. However, and I said this to Ryan off air, if the Dallas Cowboys could spend an infinite amount of money to finally do something, they probably would. But the National Football League doesn't allow them. Same with the Toronto Maple Leafs in hockey. And if you do it in baseball, you get penalized massively for it. Wasn't the case before, but like there's systems in play to create parity. And I don't want to see that go. And I don't think fixing the safety issues needs to have anything to do with trying to get rid of the parity. I think you can keep the parity and fix the safety issues, and I think the sport would be much better off for it. How about you, man?
I wholeheartedly agree. Listen, I'm going to go back to IndyCar. They've been running a spec chassis now for almost 20 seasons. and it has single-handedly saved the sport. Um, sure, when you look at it, the best teams will always rise to the top, whether it's Penske and Ganassi on the IndyCar side, or Penske, Joe Gibbs Racing, um, Hendrick Motorsports on the Cup side. Those teams will inevitably find their way to the top. They're going to win the most races at the end of the season, and one of the champions is probably going to come from one of those teams, and that's okay. Maybe you'll get a surprise champion down the road, a la Martin Truex Jr. Furniture Row a few years back, but it's okay that the big teams win the championships. But you want to see the competitiveness within the other organizations. It has been refreshing to see a Trackhouse Racing, a Petty GMS Racing, step up to the plate and win some races this year. Michael McDowell is having a career season, with Front Row Motorsports. So it's super important that they maintain that parity, and as long as they are using the same parts, that's going to maintain. You know, there obviously last week and Bristol, there were a lot of tire failures. We haven't really touched on the tire failures much, but have been a ton of tire failures, and really what we've learned is that the teams, because of how small the box is that they're working in, are trying to find half a tenth here, tenth there, and because they can't use brand spanking new $1 million parts and pieces, that they are stuck using the same parts as every other team. The way to find, I'm going to say, quote unquote, free speed has been to either A, have more aggressive cambers, or B, lowering the air pressure below the threshold that NASCAR recommends. And the cars run faster, but you're seeing the tire failures as a result. And I really, really, really like as it oh my goodness, Rodney Childers. He's the crew chief for Kevin Harvick. I really like him, and he went on Twitter on Monday, and he posted a couple posts basically describing why the tires have been failing. And he basically said that they are limited on the amount of shock ride height. There's a little piece on there that prevents them from adjusting the ride height beyond a certain point. And that's because the part is spec, and everybody's working within that boundary. And he's like, if they would just let us adjust it, we can lower the car, we can get that optimal dynamic result in the car, and then we wouldn't need to push the boundary on the tires. And I was like, no, exactly, we need to keep, because Rodney Childers is probably the smartest man in the garage. Him not being allowed to tinker on that shock and make it just that little bit better is what's made the parity so good. So it's stuff like that I want to make sure that stays. And I don't see any of that changing going into next year. Again, the areas where we're going to see the safety improvements will be in how the cars crash. How it's going to cost the teams more money because the parts are going to get destroyed. But you know what? That's a small price to pay, and I think the teams will happily pay to repair the cars and replace the parts versus having their driver miss races because of injury.
Yeah, you see what Childers is getting at, in my opinion, anyway. Is exactly what you said? They want the advantages. To me, it says something else. If you know what that window that you need to stay between is, don't push it. There's a reason why a bunch of these teams the last 2 weekends have basically known, no, we're not going to have issues. We're good where we're at. And the teams that are having the issues are almost all exclusively to the teams that are needing to push it.
Yep. And those are the playoff teams, really, that you're seeing all of these issues come from. And, I really do want to give a shout out to Kaulig Racing. Over the last 2 weeks, none of their cars have had a single problem. No tires, no power steering, no, they have been able to stay within the bounds that have been working in, and they've been fast also. And that's the other thing. You don't need to push the boundaries to be fast. You don't. There are teams running top 5, top 10 that are not having any issues whatsoever, and they're being rewarded for that by not blowing a tire or not having a power steering pump fail, or whatever, or having the ride height to a point where they're bottoming out in turns 3 and 4 and spinning into the wall, because that was also a point that they were having issues with. So really, the shout out to the team, for one, but at the risk reward point of that these teams that are blowing tires or having their issues, well, they're finishing in the 30s because they can't keep the car on the track for the duration of the race. So they're hurting themselves in the long run. If they stayed within the boundary of the rules, they'd probably finish about where they belonged.
Yeah, it probably sounds cruel. Might even sound like I'm being a dick to some people out there, but like, you're given that parameter to stay in between. Stay in between it. Don't be going all the way up to the absolute highest thing. You might get lucky, you might avoid disaster, but you're probably going to make something go wrong. It's no different than a professional sports team being forced to work within a salary cap. It really isn't. There's a bunch of them that could easily spend way over and aren't allowed to, and there's a bunch of them, even if they were allowed to, they couldn't, but they have parity given the rules that are set in place by the league. And that's what NASCAR has done, and I think the sport's better off for it. Now, I know if there's any Hendrick Motorsports fans or Gibbs Racing fans out there listening to this right now, they're probably not the biggest fans of ours, but to me, it's not even just about Kaulig Racing. It's about the sport in general and what parity can provide. Again, they introduced the charter system. If you get rid of that, you are literally tanking the value of your own charters, which is not a good thing, in my opinion. So,
yep. And I know this year, cost effective wise, the cars, they've blown their budgets. They've all said they've blown their budgets, and I do feel that frustration on their behalf. But in the end, in the long run, they will save money. These parts, they're uniform, they're going to be fairly inexpensive, especially once they start mass producing them, so they can stay within the quote unquote salary cap, and benefit not only from the parity side, but from a cost effective side as well. And and the one thing I want to say, there are teams, small budget teams, that can succeed when there is parity, because they can be smarter than the bigger teams. There is a boatload of analytics that goes into even NASCAR. You really do have to be an engineering whiz to work on these cars, because there's so many minute details, and what they can do to find some speed. To me, you can be successful as a small budget organization by using analytics to your favor. And I think you've kind of seen that. Petty GMS, Trackhouse, finding a little speed there that they might not have had in the past had the new car not come around. So, I love the concept. I love what they've done. And I know everybody says this isn't a stick and ball sport and it shouldn't be a stick and ball, but the model works. There's a reason the model exists. It works. And over, this year is an outlier. Next year is probably going to be an outlier. But over the next 5 years, once they really settle into this groove, I think it's going to really work itself out, and it's going to be good for the sport.
I hope so. I'm hopeful that all that comes to be, but I'm also petrified that NASCAR caves and makes some bad decisions, and we basically lose what this new car was meant to be. That would be pretty devastating, in my opinion. Anyways, before we wrap up here, I just wanted to touch a little bit on this weekend, Talladega. Dude, what are your expectations for the team this weekend at Talladega, Xfinity and Cup?
Well, I was completely wrong about last week. I'll tell you that. I know we didn't even touch on the Xfinity series last week. The team brought some really fast race cars to the track, surprisingly fast. Seeing AJ winning stage 2, Daniel won stage 1. They led a bunch of laps. Kind of turned into a wreck fest there down the stretch, and they didn't really get the results they deserved. AJ rallied for 4th. So, when I look at Talladega is always going to be the roll of the dice. You can prepare the best you can. You can bring the fastest car to the track, and you can still get wadded up and finish 35th. So it's so hard to say, but I expect to see the Kaulig cars at the front of the pack trying to manipulate the draft like they've done in years past. I think they are going to run in the top 5 to top 10 most of the night. And when it's time to settle the score, I don't know how it's going to play out. You can't predict these things. I will say this. AJ goes into this weekend with a 47-point buffer in the playoff standings. I expect him to take some chances because he has some room, some wiggle room. And I don't think AJ can't finish a restrictor plate race for some reason. He doesn't make the right move down the stretch for whatever reason. But I think AJ brings it home in the top 5. Another consistent run for him. And I'd like to think the other drivers can finish in the top 10 if they can avoid the madness. But at the same token, they can all get wrecked out. Again, going into the Cup Series, all right, we got Daniel Hemrick, Justin Haley. Justin Haley is one of the best restrictor plate racers in NASCAR. He's carrying a lot of momentum with that graphic we showed earlier. Really high finishing successes the last handful of weeks. So I think Justin Haley has a really strong chance at a top 10. And if the cards fall his way, he could win the race. I'm not going to sit here and predict to win, but he could win the race. And I think he'll finish in the top 10.
I think it depends on how much help he has, and I don't know if I have the most confidence in Daniel Hemrick, but it's Talladega and anything can happen. And I expect if he doesn't get collected in something early, he's gonna have just as good of a shot as any of the drivers that aren't on 4-car teams, in my opinion. So, well, go ahead, man. Were you gonna say something?
I was just gonna say, well, even if Hemrick isn't around to help him, and I don't know, I agree. I don't think Hemrick's would be super helpful on Sunday, but the Chevys, the manufacturers work together pretty well, and I think Haley has a track record now within the garage that he's a good road racer. So even if he doesn't have Hemrick, as long as he tags up with another Chevy driver, he'll be all right.
Yeah, so on the Xfinity side, I think I would be honestly, AJ, just get me some stage points at some time and finish in the top 15. Obviously, I would like more than that, but make sure you do at least that, and anything else is gravy. Even if it's stage points just in one stage and then the top 15, I would take it. You just need to pad that cushion a little bit. Obviously, if you can win it or top 5 or whatever, the team's better off. Landon Castle's job this weekend should be, no matter what happens, I am helping the 11 or the 16, no matter what. This is my race. It's not about me. I got to help these guys, which could be a problem because I know Daniel Hemrick doesn't think Landon Castle can drive a super speedway worth of shit. So,
yeah, well, Landon's going to be the biggest blocker on the face of the earth, and he's going to definitely push as best as he can. Now, what scares me about that is that could trigger a big wreck pretty easily. So we'll see how that plays out. But I agree with you. I think Landon his sole job is to make sure those other 2 cars stay as close to the front as possible.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for another episode of the Trophy Hunting Podcast. Appreciate everybody coming out and spending some time with us. Lots going on. Talladega, I guess the events begin tomorrow, and you're probably listening to this today. So today, you probably know what some of the events are. Maybe it's rained out. I don't know. We're in the past, time travel, if you will. Dude, thanks for doing this, man. Lots going on. I'm anxious for this weekend. Extremely anxious for next week. I hope we get decent results this weekend and the most obvious choice next week. But I'll have to wait and see what happens.
Absolutely. And before we log off today, I just wanted to speak out real quick. Jimmy Johnson announced this week that he was retiring from full-time racing. And as somebody that grew up in his era, I really started following NASCAR right around the early 2005s. Jimmy Johnson was somebody that, was the leader of the Cup Series. He was the man, and I just want to give a shout out to a wonderful career: 7 NASCAR Cup championships, and a bunch of wins. And I predicted last week that Jimmy's going to run the double. I am still standing by that prediction. I still think he's going to run the double. But just what a wonderful career. I did not enjoy watching him race at the time. I was a very jealous fan, but looking back at history, we got to watch something really special, and I hope Jimmy enjoys his retirement and gets to watch his girls grow up. So just wanted to get that in there while it was still fresh news.
I didn't know that had been announced. There goes my theory that maybe they announced Jimmy Johnson after his interview that his sponsor will follow him anywhere. And I mean, maybe they will on part-time stuff, depending on what he wants to do. So there you have it. Well, I'm bummed out about that. I was kind of hoping for a Cup return for him anywhere but Hendrick Motorsports. So, I mean, I guess it can happen, just part-time. We'll have to wait and see if that does happen or not. But for Ryan, I'm Shawn. This is the Trophy Hunting Podcast. Have a great weekend. October 5th. Please. Have a great weekend.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Talk to you all next time.